don't call me Dr. Weatherly, I'll tell you. It's Lissa, like Melissa, but no Ma. So in the past, I'll be walking down the hall and I'll like run into you like in the corridor between like the School of Medicine and the Heart Center, and everybody's like, "Hey, Dr. Weatherly." Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm like, who's that? So Lissa, please call me Lissa. A couple things before I start. I've been doing this my 7th year to do this. I really enjoy it. I do it to be of service to you, to help you. I started it as soon as I finished my M1 year because I thought that the gross course itself lacks some in-depth teaching. And I saw and as you can see, not much has changed. But sometimes they really have done a good job. If you think it's sparse now, when I was there, we might have had 1 or 2 lectures per block. So we've actually given this some good feedback over the years, and they've actually gotten a lot better. And they want to do a good job. There's no part of that department that is malignant. If you think that, you're wrong. And they truly are out for your good and your benefit, and they want to help you. So I started this because I noticed a lot of my classmates struggled with anatomy quite a bit. I was an MC kid. How many MC kids? Quite a bit of you. Okay. You will do fine in anatomy. You're going to be just fine. But I noticed that myself and the other MC kids in my class were a pretty good bit ahead of everybody else, and it almost to the point where it wasn't fair. So what we did, there was a good group of us who were all very good friends, we decided that we were going to start teaching the class. So we would actually do this with our class. And we would meet like twice a week up in the lab, and we would walk, we would divide into groups, and all the MC kids would go to the different tanks and walk everybody through the lab, because we pretty much knew most of the stuff already from having had it in college. And it really helped my class out. I really encourage you, from MC, to do the same thing. So don't hunker down in your knowledge base and feel like you're safe and you've got anatomy on lock. Really help your friends out and make some friends by doing that. You'll be amazed, if you've never had anatomy, how long it'll take you to go up in the lab and work through one lab objective by yourself or with someone else who doesn't know what they're doing. You can do the exact same thing with someone who went to MC who knows what they're doing in about 30 minutes. Use them as a resource. Find the ones that are nice, you know who you are, and pair up with them and ask them to help you. Do not be afraid to ask for help. Please take that and do something good with that advice. Don't be that person that is making a 95 on every test and isn't going to help anybody out. With that said, if you are an MC grad, this is probably not the place for you, but I'd love to have you. I'd love for you to stay if you find it helpful, but there is a high probability that you will not, because you're probably going to know the majority of the things that we're going to talk about. But again, I want you to be here. If you find it helpful, please do come. Please stay. And if at any point you do not, feel free to get up and meander out, as long as you do it quietly. You're not going to offend me. To get up, you might have a hot date at 5 o'clock or 4:45, and that's fine. Get up and go ahead and just go out quietly. I would much rather you use this time for your benefit. So if you're sitting here and you're like, you know what, I really already know all this, I could use this hour and a half to learn something that I don't know, then leave and go learn something you don't know, okay? Your time is very precious, and I'm very aware of that. Again, this is not designed to take you from a 93 to a 98. That's not why I am here. Okay, if you think it is, you're wrong, okay? This is to give you the base knowledge that you have to know to build upon and to make a decent grade on your test. This alone is also not going to get you an A if you're not doing anything else out of here. But it's sure not going to take you from a 93 to a 98. Does that make sense? Okay. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. Today we're going to be doing the autonomic nervous system. And we're going to be doing a lot of the abstract part of the nervous system that you can't really see and you can't really put into perspective because it's something that is very much of an idea and a concept. I'm going to break it down very, very basic to start, because sometimes that's really all you need to put some pieces together. Is something really simple for you to go, oh, that's what that means? I got it now. That makes sense. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to throw some questions out to you right now, and if you know that the answer to these questions, again, this hour is probably not going to be that helpful for you, okay? If I ask you these questions and you don't know the answer, then sit tight, because at the end of the hour and 15 minutes, you will know the answer. So what if I asked you, where are the primary cell bodies of the preganglionic fibers for the sympathetic system that control the heart? Don't say it out loud, just say it in your brain. Where are the secondary cell bodies, or the postganglionic cell bodies, for the parasympathetic fibers that control micturition, which is urination? Where are the primary or preganglionic cell bodies for the parasympathetic system that controls decreasing your heart rate? Where are the primary sympathetic or preganglionic sympathetic cell bodies that control pupillary dilation? If you know the answer to all those questions, this is probably not going to be very helpful to you. Okay? If you don't, then sit tight. We're going to learn a lot of stuff today, okay? Okay, so let's go. So let's start just basic. All right, what do these mean? So the G stands for general, okay? Everything that you learn up until this point, so from this point to the last test, everything you learn are going to be general fibers. There's another subset called special fibers that you will learn when you get to head and neck anatomy that are derived from a different type of embryonic cell. You don't have to know that right now. Everything you need to know is a general fiber. That's what the G is, okay? What is the S and what is the B? Well, yeah, nice. So the S is somatic and the B is visceral. What does that even mean? So somatic that means they came from somites and development. The best way for you to think about this is that these fibers are under voluntary control and conscious control. So these are fibers that you can tell them to do something and they will do it, or either, if it's a sensory fiber, you are aware that it is happening. So conscious and voluntary control, okay? Visceral. So the visceral is from the visceral system. So these fibers are things that are unconscious control and involuntary control, or involuntary sensation. Things that happen that you probably don't know about, that you're probably unaware of. Okay? E and A. E is efferent fibers. These are motor fibers. If you have a question stem and it asks you for a motor nerve, the answer is not an A. Anything that is motor is an E. Okay? On the flip side, anything that is an A is sensory. Okay? So general visceral afferents are sensory feedback from the visceral system. So this is unconscious awareness and sensation that's happening. Okay? General somatic efferents, this is conscious sensation of a motor function. This is like I'm going to wave at you. Okay? Is everybody with me? Let's move on. So when we talk about the difference in the visceral and somatic system, there's a big difference that separates them. Okay. So the somatic system, again, this is under conscious control. Both of these systems, when I'm about to talk about right now, is all going to be motor. All right? We're about to talk about the motor component of each of these systems. So this is going to be GSE and GPE. Okay? Both of these systems are a two-neuron system. Okay? Let's talk about the difference between the two of them. Somatic system, this is conscious control, right? This fiber, we often refer to as the primary neuron. Okay? This one is the secondary neuron. For the somatic system, your primary cell body and your primary nerve fiber or axon and your secondary cell body and nerve fiber or axon. Okay. Primary for the somatic system is is in the cerebral cortex. Okay, so that means that this cell body lives somewhere in the cerebral cortex. It's going to send out its nerve fiber out, and that nerve fiber is going to leave the cortex, and it's going to go down, and it's going to find this cell body in the synapse segment. Okay, we call this nerve fiber right here, the primary one, an upper motor neuron. Everybody's heard this before, right? From like college, right? The secondary, which is this guy, for the somatic system, it lives in the spinal cord. And its nerve fiber is called a lower motor neuron. So if I were to draw it, we're going to figure out the spot where everyone can see if I draw it. And I'm just going to pick here. So if I draw the brain and the spinal cord, the primary one is living up here in the cortex. It's going to leave, go down, and synapse on the spinal cord somewhere. If you take a cross-section through that spinal cord and you look at it like this, okay, it's going to synapse own alpha motor neurons that live right here in the ventral horn. Okay, these guys right here is this cell body. Okay. Those motor neurons are going to leave, and their lower motor neuron is going to innervate a target. Okay, so we're talking about a motor function. This one up here in my cortex, right here, is going to say, okay, I'm going to move my foot. It's going to send its primary cell body's fiber, upper motor neuron, out to the spinal cord, and it's going to synapse on your lower motor neuron in the ventral horn. And then its fiber is going to go tell the toe muscle or the foot muscle to move. And you're going to wiggle your foot. Right? Conscious control. Voluntary muscle motor function. Everybody with me? Right? Everybody? Everybody? Okay, so visceral. Why is this different? You'll see. So it's actually very similar, but just tiny little things that make it different. So we talk about this primary neuron for the visceral system. It's going to be in either the brain stem or the spinal cord.
Are you talking about its body? The body of the primary is going to be...
Yes, the cell body, this body. The cell body is either going to be in the brain stem or spinal cord. Okay? So let's take this same cross-section of our spinal cord right here. Okay? Instead of our primary cell body being up here in the brain, now it's down here in the spinal cord. Okay? It actually lives in a little area right here. That is your primary cell body for the autonomic system. Okay? It is going to send out its nerve fiber whose only reason to exist is to synapse on this cell body. Okay, that's its only reason to exist. That's the only function it has, is to innervate the cell body of the secondary neuron. Okay? Okay? This secondary cell body, it is found in a structure that we call a ganglia, or ganglion, I guess we're talking about. Okay? So the cell bodies for the visceral system or the autonomic system, they're found in a ganglion. We're going to talk about what that is in just a minute. Stay with me, okay? This ganglia is going to send out its fiber, which is this guy, whose reason to live is to innervate a target. Does everybody understand that if this fiber is looking for a ganglia, we call that fiber a pre-ganglionic fiber, before the ganglia, right? here is pre-ganglionic. Pre-ganglionic, before the ganglia, okay? It has left its cell body and it is looking for its next target, which is the ganglia, therefore it is pre-ganglionic, okay? That would mean, by nature, this one is post-ganglionic. Stay with me. This system is conscious voluntary control. This system is unconscious involuntary control. Okay? Let's talk about this cell body for just a second. No matter what system you're talking about, or either cell body actually, cell bodies don't live by themselves. Okay? They live in groups of multi-millions of them in one little area. Okay? The collection of cell bodies, if you are inside the central nervous system, it is called a nucleus. So if you're in the brain stem or spinal cord, then it is called a nucleus. All those cell bodies together in one spot are a nucleus. If a group of cell bodies is outside the central nervous system, and they live in a group, they are called a ganglia. That is the difference. Okay? So do you see why this one, which is in the central nervous system, and this one in the central nervous system is a nucleus? These are going to be found in a collection called a nucleus. Okay? This one is a nucleus. You'll learn the names of them later when you get to head and neck. This one is not a nucleus because it's outside of the brainstem and spinal cord. It's out in the body somewhere. It's a ganglia. You understand that terminology and what I mean when I say that. A group of cell bodies inside the central nervous system in the brainstem or spinal cord or brain is a nucleus. A group of cell bodies outside the central nervous system is in a collection called a ganglia. Okay? So when you hear the term ganglia, think of that as a bunch of these guys hanging, like multi-millions of them, hanging out together in one central location. Okay? Outside the central nervous system. Alright, everybody still with me? Okay, good. So again, motor only. Okay?
Question, on the somatic, does the fibers, are they not as specific as the visceral? Like the fiber, you said the only function for the visceral is like to innervate the second cell body.
They are. This fiber's only function is to innervate its lower motor neuron.
They just don't have like the names.
Yes, we just don't call them in pre and post. And this, the lower motor neuron, its function is to innervate its target,
Okay.
which is usually a muscle.
The GBE, I know the GSC are looking down the visceral one. The GBE, is that the IMLCC that you represented the other day? Is that okay?
For the sympathetic system it is. We'll talk about this later. But yes, for the sympathetic system it's called the IMLCC, which was what we're about to get to. Is everybody still with me? Let's break down the autonomic system into its parts. Okay. So when you talk about the autonomic nervous system, it has two limbs. Okay, its two limbs are the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. Let's stop right here. If I were to ask you, which of the following fiber types is the preganglionic fibers that innervate the heart, the lungs, the bladder, the rectum? What fiber type is that? If your options are GSA, GSE, GBA, GBE. GBE. If you are talking about either one of these systems, okay, okay, and you are talking about sympathetic or parasympathetic fibers, they are always and only motor. They have a sensory feedback limb, which is called GBA. GBA fibers are not parasympathetic and sympathetic. These are motor only. So if you have a question that asks you what kind of fiber is a blank sympathetic or a blank parasympathetic, it doesn't matter where it's coming from or where it's going, it's always GBE. Okay? It might have GBA running with it, doing its sensory feedback, because it's a reflex arc, but these fibers themselves are GBE only. Okay? Keep that in your brain. Okay, so let's talk about how these are different from one another. Alright, so when we talk about this sympathetic system, you've probably heard the term, have they gone over this in lecture yet? Little bit? Okay, I just don't want to be too redundant. Okay.
Not redundant.
Okay. Okay, so this is about to be like really simple, but I'm gonna say it anyway because if it's never said, you'll never understand the difference. Then I've already said it. Okay. Sympathetic, you've probably heard the phrase fight or flight, or bear in the woods. Okay, so let's just talk about that logically. Let's think about it, what happens. So I see a bear in the woods. I'm a flighter, not a fighter. Okay? So I think about all the things that have to happen to get my tail out of the woods. Okay? So that includes, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run, right? So I'm going to run away from the bear. In order to do that, my muscles are going to have to work a lot, right? A lot harder than they would than I am right now. Okay? For your muscles to be able to do that, they've got to have more blood flow. So the vessels that feed the muscles are going to dilate to get more blood to the muscles. Okay, the blood needs more oxygen, more nutrients. The muscles need more blood for more oxygen and nutrients. Okay, the next thing that's going to happen is you've got to get extra blood there, right? Because you need more blood for them to function at their maximum capacity than you do for me to stand right here. So how do you do that? You can't just make more blood, okay? So how you do it is the vessels that are going to the internal organs, they constrict. So they clamp down and all the blood that feeds all the stuff inside shunts itself out to the peripheries of the muscles. Okay? Then you've got to be able to get it there fast. So what happens is your heart rate goes up. Okay? So the sympathetic system tells the heart, pick up the pace, and you become tachycardic. Okay? The more you run, the heavier you breathe, the more oxygen you need, so your respiratory rate goes up. So the sympathetic system tells your lungs, work harder. Your bronchioles dilate, get bigger so I can get more oxygen in with every breath. Okay? It also says, you know what, I'm not really worried about stopping to take a pee or a poo, so let's just shut those organs down. And let's use that energy to get me out of the woods. Okay? Also, in order to see to get your way out of the woods, your pupils are going to dilate to allow more light to come into the back of the retina for you to be able to take in everything far ahead so that you can kind of map out your way to get out of the woods. Okay? Your muscles are burning and they're making all this extra energy. With energy comes heat. Okay? You've got to be able to get rid of all that heat. So to do that, you sweat. So the sympathetic system tells the sweat glands, open up, get rid of this heat. Okay? All of those things that are happening, that is all the sympathetic system. Okay, that is what it does at its best. The other way to think about it, in my brain, this is how I think about it when I was a med student. Instead of bear in the woods, that's what I did when I got called home in class. Like, it was like sympathetic overload. Like tachycardia, sweating, breathing heavy, like it was a disaster. And so that's also what I think about. Okay, so it's anything that essentially ramps up your metabolism. Do you have control over that? No. You can't say, get tachycardic, right? You can't say, about motor function, okay? Involuntary. It is out of your conscious control. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. So all those things we just talked about, all sympathetic, okay? So parasympathetic, how is it different? So I think of couch potato. Okay. So this is my husband during football season. So he sits like in the same spot like for like 12 hours. I think he moves to use the bathroom, but he just sits there and like right in front of the television and watches football. Like Saturday through Sunday night, he's there. I mean, he bathes. So this is him. He is like parasympathetic overload. Okay? So what are all the things that are happening with him? Okay, so first of all, he's just sitting there. His muscles don't really need to function, right? He's just sitting there. However, the whole time he's eating. He's just eating everything he can get his hand on, drinking beer, just having a grand old time. So in order to digest and take care of that, the couch potato, you need more blood flow now to your gut. Okay? You don't need it to your muscles, right? They're not doing anything. So the exact opposite thing happens. The muscles are going to clamp down and the visceral vessels are going to open and dilate so you can get more blood flow to the gut. Okay? When a commercial comes in, he gets up and he goes to the bathroom. So micturition and defecation, that is under parasympathetic control to make those things happen. Okay? Also, the TV is like 4 feet away. So he doesn't really need a whole lot of light on the back of his retina. Okay? So his pupils are going to constrict. So all they really need to see is 4 feet in front of him. He doesn't really need to sweat. So those glands are going to shut themselves down. However, to be able to eat that food that he's eating, he needs to ramp up his salivary glands. Okay? So those glands are going to go up. Okay, so everybody with me? Everybody see the difference in these two systems? Okay? Awesome. So let's talk about the specifics with them. Let's talk about where they are, what they're doing, what are they called, how do they get there. Alright, I'm going to draw two things on the board. I'm going to draw our brain again with the spinal cord. And then I'm also going to draw our 2 neuron system again. Okay. Let's talk about how these are different for each system. The hardest one by far is the sympathetic system. It's extremely confusing. Parasympathetic, once you understand sympathetic and know what it is doing, parasympathetic is really, really easy. Okay? You just might not think it's easy because you're probably getting them confused. Okay? So let's just concentrate on sympathetic for right now. Okay? And let's break it down based on what these are and what they're doing and how they're getting there. Okay? So let's take the primary. So your primary cell body for your sympathetic system. Okay, if you look at that first page of notes that we took, I told you that for the autonomic system, your primary cell body is always found in either the brainstem or the spinal cord, right? That's for both systems. For the sympathetic, it is found in the spinal cord, in a nucleus that has a very particular name. It is called your IMLCC, your intermediate lateral cellular column. Okay? That is a nucleus. That is the nucleus that holds all the cell bodies of your pre-ganglionic cell bodies for the sympathetic system. And it is found at levels T1 through LT. If I were to take T1 through LT, let's just pretend that this is T1 through LT. Okay? If I were to take a cross section through the spinal cord at any of these levels, T1 through LT, and I were to look at it, The IMLCC is found right here. Hence the name intermediolateral. It's a long nucleus that essentially runs this whole length inside the spinal cord. So when you take a cross section through it, you're just looking at just a piece of it. Okay? The IMLCC is the home of every single pre-ganglionic sympathetic fiber. So those questions I asked you earlier before we started, it doesn't matter where it's going or what it's doing. All that other fluff doesn't matter. It's the same answer. So where do you find the preganglionic sympathetic fibers that control the heart? IMLCC. Where do you find the cell bodies of the preganglionic sympathetic fibers that control the rectum or the bladder? IMLCC. It doesn't matter. Okay? Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Do we have two of those on each side? Or just one?
So IMLCC, yes, it's on each side. So you have one right here too. Yes. Okay. Something else before we keep going. I should have said this when we were talking about the difference in the two systems. Everywhere you have one, you have the other. They are a balancing circuit. Okay? It's just that one is responsible for the innervation and one is responsible for the de-innervation. Okay? So all it is a balancing act. So when you talk about heart rate, all it is a balancing act of who is going to win. Are your sympathetics going to ramp it up, or are your parasympathetics going to drive it down? Okay? Everywhere you've got one, you've got the other. And you've got them from the tip of your head to the tip of your toe. Everywhere. Both of them. Okay? Awesome. Okay. So let's go back to this guy. This is where the preganglionic sympathetic cell bodies are found. So if you see a question that asks you where they are, you know the answer, regardless of what they're doing or where they're going, okay? I can't even say it enough. The preganglionic sympathetic cell bodies that do the blank are found where? The IMLCC. For this test, that's all you need to know. For the next test, we'll break it up into every single level, T1 all the way through L2, and we'll talk about what each level is doing. But for right now, you not to know that for this test, okay? All right, so they leave the spinal cord, and they are going to give out this guy. Okay? What is he called? The preganglionic fiber. Okay? What's his job? To synapse ganglia. Okay? To synapse ganglia. That is its function and its only reason to exist. Okay? I want you, if you're taking notes, leave some space right here because we're going to come back to this guy, but it doesn't make sense unless I give you the rest of the picture first. Okay? So we're going to come back to him. But he's going to look for a what to synapsome? A ganglia. Good. So let's talk about those. So your secondary cell body, they are always found in ganglia. For the sympathetic system, you have two different types of ganglia. Okay? You've got what we call paravertebral, and you've got what we call prevertebral. Everybody seen this when you're reading? Prevertebral ganglia, paravertebral ganglia. Okay. What's the difference in the two? So, if you look at the word itself, you can figure it out. So, vertebral column, beside the vertebral column. These have a particular name. They're called the sympathetic chain ganglia. And they run from the occiput all the way down to the coccyx. You've got about 23 to 24, depending on the person, sometimes 25, ganglia and the chain. I'm not counting these things, I'm just drawing them. Okay? And you've got it on both sides. Okay, so you've got a sympathetic chain on the right and a sympathetic chain on the left. Has everybody seen this in the lab? If you haven't, you need to find it. They're going to tag it. Okay? So you need to find the sympathetic chain. And you need to know the difference between the chain and the ganglia. The ganglia are just the little widened parts along the chain, okay? You'll be able to see it in your own bodies later, once you get into thorax and you open the chest. But right now, unless it's, I haven't been in the lab this year yet, but unless they've taken it away, has everybody seen like the cadaver pieces? We used to call them the chocolate pieces. They're like nasty and brown. I haven't seen those. So they're probably will be on a laminectomy if they have the whole column. He didn't. So normally the inside the lab, unless he's not using them this year, I haven't thought to ask him. There's like a tank that has like pieces of a body in it that are like old dissected pieces. Okay, he might not be using them this year. I'll double check and let me know next time we meet. But they're really old, but they're really good because it's essentially just the skeletal area itself, and you can see like the intricate muscles, and the chain ganglia on that piece is exceptional. So if you are supposed to know it, and you find that out later, just look for it on that piece. That is truly the vertebral column with the ribs. You can see it running straight down the back. It's beautiful. Okay? But for the most part, if you don't have that, he really can't test you on it too much in the lab if you don't have that piece. Okay, but if you do, he's going to tag it. He's tagging it we've done it every year. Okay? So, paravertebral ganglia are also called the sympathetic chain ganglia. These words are synonymous. They're interchangeable. So when you see one, it means the other. Okay? So if you're reading something and it says yada 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 on the paravertebral ganglia, that means the sympathetic chain ganglia. Okay? Those are the same thing. Okay? The other group of ganglia for the sympathetic system are prevertebral. Before the vertebral column. Okay? So these, I'm going to draw them right here and then I'm going to erase it because we'll save this spot on the board. But these are found before or in front of the vertebral column. So these have very particular names. And they are named based on their location on the aorta. The aorta lives right in front of the vertebral column in the chest and in the abdomen. Okay? So the aorta has branches that come off of it. Okay? This is called, the first one is called the celiac trunk. This is inside the thorax and abdomen. The celiac trunk. The superior mesenteric artery, the renal arteries, and the inferior mesenteric arteries. These are the branches that come off of the thoracic and abdominal aorta. This is important because, yes, absolutely, and I'm going to write them for you. But this is the celiac trunk, superior mesenteric artery, renal arteries, and one on each side, and then the inferior mesenteric artery. Why is this important? Because these ganglia, these prevertebral ganglia, they live at that branch off of the aorta. And that is also their name. So there are 4 groups of these that you need to know. They are the celiac ganglia, the superior mesenteric ganglia, aortico-renal ganglia, and inferior mesenteric ganglia. So again, I say it again, there are 4 sets, not even sets, because celiac usually occurs alone. There are two different sets of the aortorenal, but just for now, let's call them a group, okay? So there are 4 different groups of prevertebral ganglia for the sympathetic system. Again, remember, we are just talking about sympathetics, okay? These groups are the celiac ganglia, superior mesenteric ganglia, aortico-renal ganglia, and the inferior mesenteric ganglia. Okay, so let's, here. Okay, so this fiber, this preganglionic fiber, and even though we are talking about talking about it like it is one thing, there are multi-millions of them. Okay, some of them are going to synapse in the sympathetic chain. Some of them are going to synapse in the celiac ganglia. Some of them are going to synapse in this one and this one and this one. Okay, so you've got preganglionic fibers that are going to all of them. Okay, it just depends on what the function of that fiber is going to ultimately be that determines which one it goes to. And we will talk about them in very specific detail before your next test. But for now, it's all you need to know. Okay? So and then we'll come back to this. We're not done with this. Okay? So let's start up at the top. The preganglionic sympathetic fibers are found where? The IMLCC, what levels is that? T1 through L2. Fibers are going to leave the spinal cord at that level. They're going to go out, and what kind of fiber is that called? A preganglionic fiber. What's it looking for? A ganglia, right? It's going to synapse in a ganglia, and it's got 5 choices. It's got the sympathetic chain ganglia, which is our paravertebral ganglia, or it's got one of your 4 different prevertebral ganglia, which are found along the aorta in front of the vertebral column. Okay? From there, the fiber that's going to leave these ganglia, what's that fiber called? Postganglionic fiber. That postganglionic fiber, I'm running out of room. That postganglionic fiber is going to its target. For the sympathetic system, its targets are going to be organs, smooth muscle, glands, and blood vessels. Organs, smooth muscle, glands, and blood vessels. Again, on the next test, we will talk about these in great detail. Okay? So the question you should be asking yourself is, when this fiber leaves the spinal cord, how does it get to here? So let's talk about it.
So the secondary cell body, there's 5 choices for those basically, right?
Yes. So you've got a ganglia along the chain, which you've got like 23, 24, 25 of them to choose from. But that particular type of ganglia is a sympathetic chain ganglia or a paravertebral ganglia. That's one choice. Okay? The other choice is a prevertebral ganglia, and it's going to either be the celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, or aortorenal ganglia. Okay? So how to get there? Okay? All right. So I never claimed to be a good artist, okay? So I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. So if you're like, what is that? Just ask, okay? So let's pretend let's pretend that this is the spinal cord and we've taken a cross section through it. Okay? And these two things on the side are the dural sac. Okay, the meningeal sac. So the spinal cord has got these little things that leave it. Let me give you a pearl. So you know this is the dorsal horn, which is mostly sensory. This is the ventral horn, which is mostly motor. The fibers that are going into the dorsal and leaving the ventral, they are called what? Rootlets. Okay, it is not called a root until it pierces the dura. So this is a root. These are rootlets. He is going to tag a rootlet. Do not call it a root. It's a rootlet. It is inside the dural sac. It is a rootlet. Okay, and you've got to specify which one. Is it a dorsal rootlet or a ventral rootlet? Okay, so if he tagged these, we put a little string around these, you would say this is a ventral rootlet. If you put the string right here, it would be the ventral root. If you put it right here, this is the spinal nerve. Do not miss that question. Have you had your lab practical yet? Like your practice one, your practice practical? Take it. If you're thinking about not taking it, take it. Okay? It is just like what the real one is going to be. It's not going to use the same tags, but it is exactly the same like concepts, and you'll get the feeling of it. So make sure you go and take it off. It's like it's on a Saturday usually. Do you know when it is? Thursday. Just kidding, it's a Thursday. What Thursday is it? Next Thursday. Maybe I can come and help. I am on Thursday.
It's Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday.
It's
2 weeks away, so not this Thursday, but the next Thursday. Okay, I'll try to be there and help them. Okay, so rootlet and root spinal nerve. Everybody's still with me, right? We're all still together. We know what's happening. Okay.
It's next Thursday.
Uh-oh, next Thursday. I need to make sure you know what it is.
You said that was the dura.
Yes, the dura. Same thing. It's the same thing. Okay. So, all right. So, has everybody seen like a drawing of what I've just done somewhere? Like, have you seen it in Gray's, or seen it in your horse review book, or seen it somewhere? You haven't, you need to find it. Okay, because I'm going to attempt to draw it, but I'll never be able to draw it as good as a real picture looks, okay, but I'm going to try. Okay. Okay, so what I have just drawn you is how these fibers get in and out of the ganglia. Okay? So, I'm going to use some colors to try to keep it separate so you can tell what's happening on the board, okay? So, what is going to happen is that your cell bodies that live in the IMLCC are going to send out their preganglionic fiber, okay? And they are going to look for the ganglia, right? So how do they get there? They gain access to the chain by what we call the rami communicans. Has everybody heard that? How? Like there's two, right? White and gray. Okay, white, think of them as doors. They're like the doors to the chain. Okay? The white is the indoor and the gray is the outdoor. Okay? So what happens is this preganglionic cell body is its preganglionic fiber, and it's motor, GDE motor, so it's going to go out the motor rootlet into the motor root and into the spinal nerve. And then it's going to go in, it's going to gain access to the chain by the white rami communicans. Okay. Once it gets there, it can do 3 different things. Okay? So let's talk about what our 3 options are.
Hey, Lisa.
Yeah.
So is the gray
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
You're going to ask me, is this one white? Is this one gray? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He's never going to tag one and expect you to know which one it is. Nope. Doesn't matter. As long as you know white fibers are pre-ganglionic. White are pre-ganglionic.
So that's why it goes to first.
So what kind of fibers are in the white rami communicans? Pre-ganglionic. Awesome. What's your question?
I was gonna say, typically in the body, would you see the white red light communicants out further than the white ones?
It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter.
What was the
Usually it's the most proximal just because of logic. It's going to go in the first one. But it doesn't matter. She asked me, is the white one going to be closer? It doesn't matter. You're never going to have to know the difference between the two. This is all an abstract concept. Okay? Again, so now we have used the white rami communicans, and our preganglionic fiber is now inside the chain. Right? Everybody with me? Have you followed me to this point? You know how it got there. Okay. Once it gets there, it's going to do one of 3 things. Okay? Let's walk through each different scenario. Okay, so let's do the first one. One option that it can do is it can synapse on the chain ganglia at the level that it entered. So that says synapse at that level. So, what you might not realize is that for every single level that you've got the IMLCC, you've got a chain ganglia that corresponds to that level. Okay? So, every single level that's got a fiber exiting, it's got a gray and white rami communicans, because it's got to be able to get that fiber inside the chain at that level. Okay? We'll sidetrack just for a second. That is different when you get above and below the levels of the IMLCC. When you get above and below it, there is not the same number of ganglia as there is every level in the spinal cord. So like when you get above it, up in the cervical region, you've only got 3 ganglia up there. Okay, we call those the superior, middle, and inferior cervical ganglia. Okay, so you don't have 8 of them. You've only got 3. But within the levels of the IMLCC, you've got a ganglia at every single level, and you've got a gray and white rami communicans attaching to it, to that nerve fiber, at every single level from T1 to L2. Okay, does that make sense? So here's another question for you knowing that information. If I have got a ganglia at every level, and I've got sympathetic preganglionic fibers leading the spinal cord at the levels of T1 through L2, does it make sense to you that I have to have a white rami communican at every level from T1 to L2? You have to. You have to be able to do this. You have to be able to get that fiber into the chain. So every single level that you've got the IMLCC, T1 through L2, you have got a ganglia that corresponds and a gray and white rami communicans for every one of those levels. Alright? Everybody still with me? We're going to come back to that point in a second. Okay. So when it chooses to synapse at that level, the fiber that's going to leave the chain ganglia is what kind of fiber? Good. Don't miss it. Okay. Post-ganglionic. It is leaving the ganglia. It is post-ganglionic. Okay? So that fiber that's leaving the chain, that's post-ganglionic, it can either go back out to the gray rami and join back with the spinal nerve, or instead, it can exit the chain and go innervate in a target organ in the thorax or abdomen. Okay? Some of you look confused. I'll say it again. Okay? So the ganglia on the chain at that level, its post-ganglionic fiber can leave the ganglia, and when it does, it can do one of two things. It can either go back out the gray rami and join back up with the spinal nerve. Because, and why would it do that? Because it's going to the places that spinal nerve is going. Remember I told you that it's everywhere, from the tip of your head to the tip of your toe. So it's got to get out there somewhere. It's got to get out to the sweat glands in your arms. It's got to get out to the glands, like in your neck. It's got to get to the smooth muscle around the hair follicles on your head. Okay, it's got to get everywhere. I hear you. I gotcha. So in order to get there, it's got to join back up with the spinal nerve and ride it where it's going.
So is the red plus the blue?
The red stops here, but the blue joins back up here. Okay, I'm going to say that again because I really want you to understand that concept. Okay, the IMLCC fiber is going to leave. It's going to go in the white rami to get access to the chain ganglia. Okay, once it gets there, it can do one of three options. We are still on option one. It can synapse at that level. Okay, on the ganglia. The ganglia the fiber that leaves the ganglia is called a post-ganglionic fiber. That fiber can either join back up with the spinal nerve by exiting out the gray rami and joining back with the spinal nerve to go everywhere that nerve is going. So, in lab, when you grab the median nerve and you hold it in your hand, you are holding, depending on where you're holding it, you might be holding a branch that's just motor only or just sensory only, depending on where you're holding the median nerve. But let's say you're holding it at right where it comes off the brachial plexus. When you're holding it in your hand, inside your fingers, you have got GDE, GDA, because they go together, they're a reflex arc, GSE, and GSA inside your hand. Because that fiber is carrying these post-ganglionic fibers to their targets, which out in the skin is going to be your capillaries, your blood vessels, your sweat glands, the smooth muscles around your hair follicles. You understand that concept? Okay? If it doesn't join back up with the spinal nerve, that means it's not going out there to the capillaries and the sweat glands and the smooth muscles around the hair follicles. Instead, it's going to the organs on the inside. It's going to like your heart and your lungs and your gut, okay? That one is going to exit straight off the chain and go inside the cavity of the thorax and abdomen. Okay? And that's doing organs. Okay, she's first. Hold on.
Okay, I was just going to ask, in our notes, they further down into 4 options. Are you just combining this one?
Yes, I'm just saying that this one is either this one or this one.
So, like, the third option would be like sleeping.
I haven't gotten there yet, but that's coming. It's different, but it's coming. Yes.
So do somatic nerves go for the spinal nerve as well?
Yes, so this nerve right here is holding the alpha motor neurons that came from right here that are going to go like innervate your toe or your arm or your...
So they just pass?
Yeah, they don't have anything to do with this system. The somatic nerve, like if If this was the somatic nerve, it would go like this. This alpha motor neuron would go. And keep going. Somatic nerves have nothing to do with this chain.
And you said the ones that are not exiting via the gray rami, the ones that are going out, those go to the thorax specifically? Or
Thorax, that's a great point. They're going to the thorax specifically. You don't really have to know that for this test, but that is correct. So what he asked me is, are these that are postganglionic, that are not joining back to the spinal nerve, they're going out into the cavity, they're going to the thorax. Okay? In particular, they're going to the heart. Heart and lungs, technically. They're going to become your cardiopulmonary thoracic nerves, but you don't have to know that for this test. Okay? Okay, so everybody understands that this is an option, and it can either go back with the spinal nerve to go do capillaries, sweat glands, smooth muscle around your hair follicles, or it can leave the chain and go out into the thoracic cavity, and it's postganglionic, going to the heart and lungs. Everybody with me? Good. All right, that's option 1. Synapse at that level, and then the postganglionic fiber leaves. Option 2. It can enter the white rama and instead of synapsing at that level, it can enter the chain and either go up or down the chain and synapse at another level. So why would it ever do that? Because if you've only got fibers from T1 through L2, so if your highest fiber is T1, how in the world are you going to get it out this ganglia to go up into the head? It's got to enter in the white rama at T1 and go up the chain and synapse in one of the cervical ganglia. Or you might have a fiber that's leaving L2 that's going to go in the white rama at L2, and it's going to go down here to the sacral ganglia and synapse there and then leave. Yes?
So pre-ganglionic fibers only synapse at the level that they're going to exit. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, yes, that's correct. Yes. He said that fibers are only going to synapse at the level they're going to exit. I'll explain. I have a way to explain your point. So bear with me.
So you're never gonna see it go from like L1 to L2.
Like it's never gonna. If this is T1, you're never gonna synapse at T1 and then your postganglionic gonna go up to the cervical region and exit. You're never gonna do that. Why would you do that when you've got a ganglia in the cervical region? That's what he's saying. He's saying, why would you ever synapse at L2 and then your postganglionic fiber go all the way down the chain and then exit somewhere else? No. You're going to run the chain as a preganglionic fiber and synapse at the level you're going to exit.
Will the preganglionic fibers that are doing this always come from T1 or L2? For instance, would you ever have a preganglionic fiber coming from T2?
Yes,
Take this off?
you do. You do. Not very many, but you do.
The ones towards the top would always go up.
Yes, you don't got T1 going down to the lumbar region. That's just redundant.
I know this is a lot of questions, I guess, but do you ever have one that comes from, let's say, T2 and goes up and then synapses in T1? Or is it always going to go to one of these other ones that doesn't have a spinal cord exit at that level?
If it has the option to exit at its level, to do what it needs to do there, it's going to leave there. The only reason you would ever go up or down and exit is if you are going to innervate something at that level. Okay? So, does everybody understand that if I go up or down the chain, and I synapse there, so this one goes up and synapses here, let's pretend that this is a cervical ganglia. Okay? Alright, let's pretend that this is the inferior cervical ganglia, superior cervical, one of the cervical ganglia, okay? Does everybody understand that post-ganglionic fiber is going to exit the gray rami if that levels get out? Okay? So does it make sense to you that every single level of the chain, you have to have gray rami? Because you have to have the ability to get out of the chain, right? You have to have the option of that post-ganglionic fiber to join back up with the spinal nerve and go to the skin wherever it's going to be innervated from that level. So you have to have a gray at every single level on the chain. Do you have a white rami in the cervical region? No, because you don't have anything going in at the cervical region. So white rami are only found at T1 through L2, because that's the only place you've got fibers trying to get in the ganglia. But you've got gray rami throughout the entire chain. Get that in your brain. Okay, you're going to see it again. Okay?
So technically, if you tag some in the cervical region, then you have to be more specific and say gray.
There's only one. It's only gray.
So that's my question.
Yes, if he is up in the superior cervical ganglia and he tags this guy, it's gray. He's not going to do that, but that would be gray.
So in the gray rami going to go out to the target in the cervical region. So does it go to the gray rami to go out to the target in the
If it's joining back with the spinal nerve, it's always going out to gray rami. You only have them leading and going out into the thoracic cavity at the levels in the thoracic cavity. It doesn't need to go out this way up here at the time. It's only going to the spinal nerve when you get above and below T1 to L2. Because it's only that is only for the stuff out in the periphery, the sweat glands, smooth muscles, blood vessels, capillaries. This, like if it were to go out here, again, in the next test you'll learn that they're called the cardiopulmonary thoracic nerves. In this particular, yes, that's why I want you to understand that's why it's different. Because here, the synapse is where it went up and synapsed. Because it's probably showing you just option 1. Okay? So again, option 2 is to go up or down and synapse at another level. Yes?
Will it ever go up or down and exit medially like it does?
No. You only have post-ganglionic fibers that exit out this way in the thoracic area. Yes?
The one that went up and synapsed in the cervical.
Yes. Yes.
That's what it becomes.
Yes. Yes. It is joining back with the spinal nerve to go out to the skin and the peripheries, to sweat glands, smooth muscles, capillaries. Alright, if you have another question, come up to me after because we need to move. Okay. The third option. Okay? The third option, the same thing has happened up to this point. It's left the IMLCC, it has entered into the white rami, and it is in the chain. Okay? This one, however, is not going to synapse in the chain. This one is looking for one of these guys. Okay? So this option, we are going to use a pre-vertebral ganglia. Okay? So here, we are leaving the chain, and we are going out into the thorax and abdomen, looking for a pre-vertebral ganglia to synapse in. What kind of fiber is this? Pre-ganglionic. When that happens, that fiber is called a splanchnic nerve. A splanchnic nerve is a pre-ganglionic fiber that is looking for a pre-vertebral ganglia, a ganglia that is out in the body. I'll say it again. A splanchnic nerve is a pre-vertebral ganglia that is looking for a it's a pre-ganglionic fiber looking for a pre-vertebral ganglia. Okay? Again, a splanchnic nerve. It is a pre-ganglionic fiber going out into the body looking for a pre-vertebral ganglia. Okay? Next test, you'll learn all of them, what their names are, what level they're coming from, where they're going to, where they're going to synapse, and what they're going to innervate. Okay? Hang with me, hang with me, hang with me. Don't leave, don't lose, don't let me lose you. Okay, so here. The third option is exit the chain as a splanchnic nerve, which is pre-ganglionic, looking for a pre-vertebral ganglia.
Can you spell splanchnic?
S-E-L-A-N-C-H-N-I-C. Some people say splanknic. Okay. So does everybody see your three different options? Let's run through them quickly one more time. Okay. Regardless of which option you choose, the first thing that happens is you've got a preganglionic cell body in the IMLCC at the levels of T1 through L2. It's going to send out its fiber, which is preganglionic, that's going to go inside the white rami communicans that's found only at the level of T1 through L2. It's going to get inside the chain. Once it gets there, it's going to do one of three things. It's either going to synapse on the chain at that level. It's either going to go up or down and synapse on the chain at another level, or either it's going to pass straight through the chain, still preganglionic, looking for a prevertebral ganglia, and that is a splanchnic nerve. Yes?
So there's an exit point other than the great famous weekend and the ganglion chain?
Like, what is the exit?
She asked her how where's the splanchnic nerve?
Oh, where's the splanchnic nerve coming from? It's coming directly off the ganglia. Directly off the ganglia. It looks like a little nerve that's coming right off of this.
So it's gonna, wherever the level that it needs to go, it's just gonna find the level and exit off of that individual splanchnic nerve.
Yep.
So are you saying that splanchnic nerves are located on the ganglion all across the sympathetic?
T1 through L2.
Okay.
Okay? All the ones in certain levels, when they exit the ganglia, they actually join together. And that's the splanchnic nerves from multiple ganglia levels are going to join together and make one big splanchnic nerve.
So they exit their level.
They exit their levels. Nope.
In option 2, you said that sending those ganglionic nerves with extracerebrally, are those in the same axon bunch of nerve?
No, they're different. They're different. And they're not splanchnic. They are postganglionic. But they do come off the ganglia just like this, but they're not carried in a splanchnic nerve.
Storm said something about like urination.
Uh-huh.
And I think you asked what the second cell body was, and so would that be in that, which ganglia would that be in? Do we need to learn the functions of each ganglia?
Next test.
Okay, so we don't.
Not for this test.
Okay.
But next test you do absolutely do. We'll go over them. Okay? Alright, but does everybody, are you hanging with me at this point? Even if it's not crystal clear, do you feel like you kind of got it if you were to read it again? Okay, let's move. Okay. We honestly probably only have about 8 more minutes.
Oh, altogether?
Altogether.
Oh.
Yes, so let's just move on. Okay? Okay. like, once you understand this, it's like, you read it a couple times and like, you own it, okay? The reason people have problems is because they confuse the two. Okay, so now that you know all about the sympathetics, let's talk about parasympathetics, okay? So para, okay, its primary cell bodies are going to be in the brainstem and the spinal cord. Specifically, the brainstem, cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. Okay. And the spinal cord, specifically levels S2, 3, and 4. Okay. The interesting thing is that in the brainstem, if you take a cross section of the brainstem, it looks absolutely nothing like this. If you've done neuroanatomy, you know what I'm talking about. It looks really weird, and you got like all kind of weird different nuclei everywhere. Don't worry about that. But the cool thing is if you were to take a cross section of the spinal cord at the level of S2, and you were to look at it like this area where these parasympathetics leave is in the exact same spot as the IMLCC. We just do not call it a particular name. It's a totally separate nucleus, but it's in the same spot. If you take a neuroanatomy, you'll know that there are multiple different nuclei within this. They all have different lamina numbers. Different nucleus, same spot. Does it have its own name? You don't have to know it. When you get to neuroanatomy, you'll learn the lamina numbers. You do not have to know it, okay? But it's in the same spot. Okay. Its preganglionic fiber is looking for a ganglia. The thing about the parasympathetic system is there's only one type of ganglia, and they don't have names. They're just called parasympathetic ganglia. So whereas you have to know the names of these, no names, just parasympathetic ganglia. But what I do want you to know is listen to me, none of these fibers use these. You're never going to have a parasympathetic using any of these. Are you going to have a parasympathetic ever synapse in the sympathetic chain? No. That's why it's called the sympathetic chain. Right? They're never going to use these ganglia, ever, ever, ever. A parasympathetic, or preganglionic parasympathetic, is never going to use a celiac ganglia. It's never going to use an aortic-renal ganglia. It's never going to use a superior mesenteric or an inferior mesenteric ganglia. These are only sympathetic.
So no such thing as a parasympathetic splanchnic.
Oh, great question. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. So the next thing, this ganglia that's leaving the spinal cord at this level is going to leave the spinal cord, and it's going to be what type of fiber? I'm sorry, I mixed y'all up. This fiber right here, leaving the spinal cord, is preganglionic. It's looking for a ganglia. The fiber leaving the ganglia is what? Postganglionic. Sorry, I didn't mean to mix y'all up. Postganglionic. It is looking for a target. Alright, that is the nut and bolts. What he asked is a great question. He said, do you have parasympathetic splanchnic nerves? The answer is yes. And it's because, what did I tell you was the definition of a splanchnic nerve? It is a preganglionic fiber outside of the spinal cord that is looking for what type of ganglia? Prevertebral. Every single one of these ganglia are prevertebral. Every one of them. Because they're not in the chain. Oh, sorry. Every one of these is prevertebral. Okay? And they are found either inside the wall of the organ itself or right next to it. Okay? So these are all prevertebral, which just means in front of the vertebral column. And they are all either right inside the wall of the organ that they're going to innervate or right next to it.
But they're not the same prevertebral as the sympathetic?
No, no, no.
Okay.
Prevertebral just means a ganglia that's in front of the vertebral column.
All right, thank you.
Okay? So, if this fiber, yes?
So the preganglionic fiber is going to leave the spinal cord and go to the secondary ganglia. The ganglia itself is really close to the target, so the fiber's short. Is that what you're saying?
This fiber is short.
Right.
This fiber is really long. Yes, I'm coming to that, yes. Okay, this fiber, this preganglionic fiber, that is leaving the spinal cord, that is going to look for its ganglia that's next to its target organ, it is a preganglionic fiber looking for a prevertebral ganglia. So it is called a splanchnic nerve. That group of fibers is called the parasympathetic splanchnic nerves or the pelvic splanchnic nerves. So they effectively are going to leave the spinal cord down in the pelvis. And they are going to, we'll talk way more about this on your next test, but they're going to leave the spinal cord at S2, 3, and 4, and they're going to go out into the body, and they're going to go look for their target ganglia that's next to the organ that it's going to innervate. Okay? Those are called the pelvic splanchnic nerves. If you went to MC, Dr. Baldwin calls those the nervae irrigantes. Okay? If you didn't, then forget I said that. Okay? But they're the same thing. Okay? Pelvic splanchnic nerves. They are your parasympathetics. These splanchnic nerves over here, they have names too that you'll learn for your next test, but I'm going to say them in case you're reading them so you don't get confused. Greater, lesser, least, lumbar splanchnic. They belong to this system. Pelvic splanchnics belong to this system. We'll say it again. These splanchnic nerves for the sympathetic, greater, lesser, least, lumbar splanchnic nerves. They are sympathetic. This system, pelvic splanchnic nerves, they are parasympathetic. Okay, last thing, because she brought up a very good point. Does it make sense in your brain that if the sympathetic system, if its preganglionic fiber is going just right here and synapsing, or even if it's going to one of these, which lives right in front of it on the aorta, that it's actually pretty small, like that big, or that big, okay? Really, really short preganglionics. Everybody agree with that statement? Okay. Then once it synapses and its ganglia, whichever one it chooses, from the ganglia, it's then got to go all the way out to its target organs. Okay? So the postganglionic fiber, really long. Okay? So, for example, if we synapse in the sympathetic chain right here, and we're going to go do the smooth muscle around the hair follicles that are on your big toe, that's got to go a really long way from your spinal cord, right? So these postganglionics, that's probably my husband, sorry. These postganglionics are really long. Short preganglionics, long postganglionics. All right, contrast. This system, you've got this preganglionic fiber that is essentially got to travel all the way to its target organ to even find its ganglia. So these preganglionic fibers are really, really long. However, the postganglionic fiber, the ganglia is either inside the wall of the organ it's going to innervate or either right next to it. So the postganglionics for this system are really, really short. Do you get that concept of how they're very different? Yes. Yes, parasympathetics are always going to leave at their level. Next test, we'll talk about how they move up and down, but they will always leave at their level. One more thing, and then we're done, I promise. I promise I'll stop saying that. Okay. Let's talk about one more aspect of the parasympathetic system. When you talk about the difference in what these are innervating, these versus these, you need to know one particular thing. This might win your test. The only one of the cranial nerves that have parasympathetic fibers that innervates anything outside of the head is the vagus nerve. Cranial nerve 10. Vagus means wanderer. That's what it means. It wanders outside of the cranial vault and it innervates things inside the chest and thorax. Chest and abdomen. Okay? It is going to leave and it's going to go down and do all of your parasympathetics inside the chest and part of the abdomen. These pelvic splanchniks are going to leave the pelvic area and they're going to go up and down. But what I want you to know is at what level this stops. The transition point is what we call the splenic flexure. What does that mean? If this is the large intestine, small intestine kind of lives inside it, all jumbled up like this. Okay? So this would be appendix, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, anus. Okay? The splenic flexure is the curve in the colon where the spleen is. It's the splenic flexure, flexing point of the colon. And the line is not like this. The line is like this. Parasympathetics are going to carry all innervation above my hand. It's everything above the splenic flexure. But don't think about it like this. It's actually a diagonal. Because even though the small intestine looks like, if you do it this way, it looks like it's below the splenic flexure, but it's not. It's actually above. And even though this colon looks like it's above, looks like it's below, it's not, okay? So think about it this way instead. So the vagus nerve is going to do all of the colon, that means ascending and transverse, to the level of the splenic flexure, including the small bowel. Okay? So vagus nerve is going to do everything inside the chest, heart, lungs, stomach, gallbladder, appendix, liver, spleen, ascending colon, transverse colon, small intestine. Okay? Everything below that point is going to be taken over by the pelvic splanchnic nerves, S2, 3, and 4. So it's going to pick up your descending colon, your sigmoid colon, your rectum, your anus. Well, kind of, not really your anus. Your bladder, your ovaries, your testicles, your ductus deferens, your epididymis, everything, all your gonads, all your micturition, the main descending area of defecation, all of that is going to be below the splenic flexure. Okay, again, everything above, vagus nerve. Everything below, pelvic splanchnic nerve. You're done. Get out of here.